Hello friends, welcome to the HFY Ode, where we bring you new science fiction stories, a new world, a new adventure. And yes, there is no robotic or AI voices here, only real human voices with real human touch. So let's start this journey, and please subscribe my channel if you like the stories and press the bell icon for the latest updates. Let's have a story. Okay.
They told us the archive was a graveyard. 17 billion records. 43 extinct civilizations. Every single one had left the same thing behind. A final transmission, a monument, a warning carved into their last surviving structure. Stay away from Sector 78. We thought we knew better. We thought warnings from dead species were just superstition, archaeological curiosities. The frightened last words of primitives who didn't understand stellar mechanics or quantum navigation. Then, the humans walked into Sector 78 like they owned it. And when they walked out 3 cycles later, the entire Convergence Council sat in silence for the first time in recorded history. Not because of what the humans found in that sector, but because of what they didn't bring back with them. My name is Traverse of Countless Stars, 3rd adjunct to the Salvage Reconnaissance Fleet, and I still can't sleep in vacuum anymore. Not after I saw what one human did with a navigation error, 12 minutes of air, and something they called spite. This is what happened when we finally understood why those 17 billion warnings all said the same thing, and why for once in our species' history, we should have listened to the dead. I was 3 sips into the worst reconstituted nutrient paste in the fleet when the proximity alarm started screaming. Not the polite chime we used for debris fields. The other alarm, the one that meant something alive and unidentified had just entered scanning range of a restricted zone that hadn't been touched in 4,000 orbital cycles. My second stomach dropped. 3rd adjunct Traverse. Commander Kess didn't look up from her screen, but her crest flattened against her skull, the Velocian equivalent of a stress migraine forming in real time. Please tell me that's a sensor ghost. I was already pulling up the feed, fingers trembling against the haptic interface. 3 sips of paste. I'd only gotten 3 sips before the universe decided to ruin my day. Negative Commander. Single vessel. Mass consistent with light reconnaissance class. Energy signature is unfamiliar. Unfamiliar how? I zoomed the sensor array, narrowing the scan field until the signature resolved into something my screen could actually parse instead of just screaming error codes. Unfamiliar as in not in the database. Not Convergence. Not any of the fringe collectives. Definitely not Remnant class. The power distribution is all wrong. Too much bleed. Too inefficient. It's like they're running half their systems on chemical propulsion. Kess looked up. Her inner eyelid flickered. That's not possible. Tell that to the scan. The unidentified vessel was small, angular, made of materials that absorbed sensor pings in ways that suggested either cutting-edge stealth composites or just really primitive metallurgy. It was coasting on a ballistic trajectory directly toward the edge of Sector 78, the dead sector, the one with 43 extinction-level warnings carved into every derelict station we'd ever surveyed. The one absolutely nobody was supposed to enter without council clearance, archaeological oversight, and about 6 layers of bureaucratic authorization that took years to process. They're going in, I said. Kess stood. Her claws clicked against the deck plating, a nervous habit she thought she'd trained out of herself. Hail them. Standard convergence protocol. If they don't respond, escalate to the deterrence sequence. I sent the hail. Broad spectrum, every language codec in our library, even the old dialects nobody used anymore because they were too flowery and inefficient. Nothing. The vessel didn't slow, didn't alter course, didn't even acknowledge the transmission. They're ignoring us, I said. Impossible. Nobody ignores a council hail. Not unless they're... Kess stopped mid-sentence, crest rising slightly. Pirates. Pirates don't fly into dead sectors. There's nothing to steal except radiation and regret. The vessel crossed the threshold into Sector 78. I watched the coordinates update on my screen, a tiny blip of thermal signature, and mass readings vanishing into the static-heavy region of space that had swallowed entire expeditionary fleets over the centuries. Fleets that had gone unauthorized, equipped, ready for anything. None of them came back. Log it, Kess said quietly. Mark the time, trajectory, and last known energy output. If they come out, we intercept. If they don't, we add them to the memorial list. She nodded. Her claws clicked again. 3 times. Fust. I saved the file, flagged it for the morning briefing, and tried to go back to my nutrient paste. It had congealed into something vaguely toxic looking. Perfect. 12 hours later, the vessel came back. I was off shift, halfway through a fitful sleep cycle where I kept dreaming about my ex-broodmate's stupid promotion party, when my wrist comm started vibrating hard enough to wake me and 3 of my neighbors. Traverse. Bridge. Now. Kess didn't wait for a response before cutting the line. I threw on my duty harness and ran. My joints ached. Velocians aren't built for sudden movement after rest cycles, but I made it to the bridge in 4 minutes, which had to be some kind of personal record. The entire command crew was there. Skrinli. Faces tense. They came out, Kess said before I could ask. Same vessel. 47 minutes ago. I slid into my station, pulling up the sensor logs. The trajectory was wrong. The ship had entered Sector 78 on a straight ballistic line. No course corrections, no deviation. It came out at a completely different vector. Hardburn. Multiple direction changes. Erratic acceleration patterns that suggested either catastrophic damage to their maneuvering systems or they were running, I said. Kess looked at me. Running from what? I don't know. But look at the energy output. They burned through 30% of their reactor mass in the last 20 minutes of flight. Nobody does that unless they're trying to outrun something that's faster, or something they can't fight. I nodded. The vessel had crossed back into convergence-monitored space, then gone completely dark. No emissions. No reactor signature. Either they'd powered down entirely, or they'd suffered a catastrophic failure. Current position? Kess asked. I overlaid the drift calculations. Approximately 40,000 kilometers off our starboard. Coasting. Likely unpowered. Survivors. Unknown. Kess didn't hesitate. Prep a shuttle. We're going over there. I'd been on salvage runs before. Derelicts. Abandoned stations. Once, memorably, a luxury yacht that had been drifting for 6 decades with all the automated systems still playing soft music through the corridors. This was different. The shuttle's exterior lamps cut through vacuum, illuminating the hull of the vessel as we approached. Up close, it looked even more primitive than the scan suggested. Riveted plating, visible weld seams, heat scoring across the nose cone that spoke of atmospheric entry. Hard entry, the kind that stripped ablative layers down to bare metal. That thing survived re-entry, our pilot muttered. Multiple times from the look of it. Focus, Kess said. She was strapped into the seat beside me, her claws drumming against the armrest in that same nervous rhythm. Hull breach check. I scanned. Negative. Pressure's holding. Atmosphere reads, oxygen-nitrogen mix. 21% O2. Habitable for most species. Life signs. Faint. 1 contact. Humanoid physiology. Elevated heart rate. They're alive but barely. Kess gestured to the airlock. Match pressure and going slow. If there's still air, they might be conscious. We docked. The clamps engaged with a hiss that echoed through both hulls. I checked my suit seals twice, old habit from academy training, and stepped into the airlock. The inner door opened. The interior of the vessel was cramped. That's the word. Every surface covered in exposed conduits, manual controls, physical switches, and levers like something out of a historical archive. The lighting was dim, emergency spectrum red that turned everything the color of old blood. And it smelled. Not decay, something else. Sweat, metal, burned insulation. A smell that meant someone had been living in this coffin for far too long. Contact ahead, I said, reading the scanner. 20 meters, central corridor. We moved forward. Kess took point, her sidearm drawn, but lowered. I followed, trying not to trip over the maze of cables and jury-rigged repairs that seemed to cover every horizontal surface. The corridor opened into what might have been a command deck. Screens flickered. Half the controls were dark. And slumped over one of the consoles, still strapped into an acceleration couch, was the pilot. Human. I'd seen images. Records. The Convergence had just opened diplomatic channels with their species 6 cycles ago, and most of what we knew came from cultural exchange files and badly translated first contact reports. Humans were supposed to be durable, adaptable, persistent in ways that confused the xenobiologists. This one looked half dead. Male, probably. Hard to tell through the flight suit. Dark hair matted with sweat. Skin pale, almost gray. His breathing was shallow, ragged, each exhale rattling in his chest like something had come loose inside. Kess holstered her weapon and leaned closer. Can you hear me? The human's eyes opened. Brown. Bloodshot. They tracked to Kess, then to me, then back to Kess with the slow, unfocused movement of someone operating on fumes and spite. They were Convergence. His voice was rough, the translator struggling with the accent and the damage in his throat. Yes, Kess said gently. You crossed into Sector 78. You came out. What happened? The human tried to laugh. It turned into a cough that shook his entire frame. What happened? He repeated. I found out why your warnings exist. Kess and I exchanged glances. We need to get you to medical, I said. Whatever you saw, I didn't see it. The human's hand moved, slow and trembling, toward a data module slotted into the console beside him. I heard it. He pulled the module free and held it out. His hand shook. This is the only thing that matters now. Get it to your council. All of them. Every species in the Convergence. Kess took the module carefully. What is this? The human's eyes locked onto hers. Proof that the archive doesn't lie. We got him stabilized. Barely. The medical bay aboard the Resurgence wasn't designed for human physiology, but our medic was good, 3 in stock, 6-limbed, and blessed with the kind of steady nerve that made her perfect for trauma cases. She hooked the human up to a biosupport rig, flooded his system with broad-spectrum stabilizers, and declared him stable enough to not die in the next hour. High praise. I sat in the observation room, watching through the viewport as the medic worked. The human was unconscious now, his breathing regulated by the machine, doing half the work his lungs couldn't manage. Kess stood beside me, the data module clutched in her primary hand. Have you listened to it? I asked. No. Why not? She looked at me. Her crest was still flat. Because if it's real, I want the full council to hear it first. If it's not, I don't want to be the fool who started a panic over nothing. Fair. We stood in silence for a while, watching the medic adjust settings and monitor readouts that meant nothing to me. He crossed into Sector 78, I said quietly. Alone. Unauthorized. In a ship that barely qualifies as spaceworthy. And he came back. He did. Nobody comes back from Sector 78. Kess turned the module over in her hand, studying the scratched casing and the faint human glyphs etched into the side. Maybe nobody else had a reason to. The council convened in the high chamber, a circular room with hollow projectors embedded in the floor and seats arranged in ascending tiers that made everyone feel equally important and equally small. I wasn't supposed to be there. Third adjuncts don't get council clearance. But Kess vouched for me, and the human, still unconscious in medical, had listed me as the secondary witness in the report sheet filed. So I sat in the back row, trying not to fidget, while the representatives from 17 different species filtered in and took their seats. The presiding arbiter, a Clethrian with silver-edged mandibles and a voice like grinding stone, called the session to order. We are convened to review an incident logged by Commander Kess of the Resurgence. A human vessel entered Sector 78 without authorization and returned bearing evidence. Kess stood. She placed the data module on the presentation plinth, and the hollow projectors hummed to life. What you're about to hear, she said, was recovered from the human pilot's ship. He claims it was recorded inside Sector 78, approximately 4 hours into his unauthorized survey. She activated the module. Static. Then a voice. Human. Male. Calm in the way people are calm when they've already accepted they're going to die. This is Lieutenant Declan Rourke, Terran Survey Corps, operating under emergency salvage protocol. I am inside the derelict structure designated K. 77 on convergence charts. Local time is, hell, I don't know. My clock's fried. Sounds in the background. Footsteps. Metal creaking. The faint hum of a portable light source. I found something. Not what we expected. Not debris. Not a crash site. It's a chamber. Walls are covered in the same symbols from the outer warnings. 43 different languages, same message. Over and over. Silence. Breathing. Stay away. More footsteps. There's a central platform. Stone, I think. Or something that looks like stone. There's an object in the center. Spherical. Smooth. Doesn't reflect light. Just absorbs it. And it's humming. The sound shifted. A low vibration, almost subsonic, that made my teeth ache even through the recording. I'm getting closer. The hum is louder. My scanner's going haywire. Radiation levels are climbing, but it's not any type I recognize. It's like the damn thing is pulling in energy from somewhere else. A pause. Longer this time. Oh, that single syllable carried more weight than any scream could have. Oh, that's not a power source. That's not a weapon. His voice dropped to a whisper. It's a lock. The recording cut to static. Then, something else came through. Not a voice. Not exactly. More like the memory of sound, compressed and distorted until it didn't belong to any species I'd ever heard. It spoke in harmonics that shouldn't exist. Words that translated into 17 different languages simultaneously, each one saying the same thing. You were told. The chamber went silent. The arbiter's mandibles clicked. Once. Twice. Replay that, she said. Kess did. You were told. Someone in the upper tier stood and left without a word. 2 others followed. The arbiter didn't stop them. The human, she said. Where is he now? Medical bay aboard the Resurgence, Kess replied. Unconscious but stable. When he wakes, I want him here. I want to know how he survived. I want to know what he did after that recording ended. She looked at the empty hollow projector where the static had finally faded back to silence. And I want to know why, after 4,000 cycles, something in Sector 78 is finally responding to intrusion. Declan Rourke woke 6 hours later. I was there when it happened. Partly because I've been assigned to monitor him, partly because I couldn't sleep anyway. The recording looped in my head. That voice. Those words. You were told. Rourke's eyes opened. He stared at the ceiling for a long moment, then turned his head and saw me sitting in the corner. You're the one who pulled me out, he said. His voice was stronger now, less rattle and more rasp. Technically, yes. He tried to sit up, failed, grimaced, and settled back against the support rig. Did they listen to it? The council did. All of them. And they want to talk to you. Soon as you're able. Rourke closed his eyes. Figures. I leaned forward. What happened after the recording? You got out. You made it to your ship. How? He smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. I ran. That's it. That's it. I waited. He sighed. The sphere, the lock, whatever it is, it didn't follow me. Didn't try to stop me. It just watched. I could feel it. Like standing in front of something massive and patient and absolutely certain you'll come back. Will you? No. He said it with such finality that I believed him. Then, why give us the recording? Why warn us? Rourke opened his eyes and looked at me. Really looked, the way someone does when they're trying to decide if you're worth the truth. Because, he said slowly, whatever's locked in there, it doesn't care about humans. We're new. We're irrelevant. We stumbled into the wrong room, and it barely noticed. He paused. But you? The Convergence? You've been dancing around Sector 78 for millennia. Building warnings. Erasing records. Pretending it doesn't exist. His smile turned cold. It knows your names. The council chamber felt smaller the second time. Maybe it was the weight. Not physical weight. The kind that presses against your mind when you realize the universe is larger and stranger and more hostile than any training simulation ever prepared you for. Declan Rourke stood in the center of the presentation plinth, still wearing the medical support harness under his flight suit. The Terran diplomatic envoy had wanted him in formal attire, something dignified and council-appropriate. Rourke told them to shove it. I liked him more after that. The Arbiter's mandibles clicked impatiently. Lieutenant Rourke, you have been summoned to clarify your unauthorized entry into Sector 78 and the evidence you recovered. Rourke didn't flinch, didn't bow, just stood there with his arms crossed, looking like someone who'd already died once and decided he didn't owe anyone politeness. Ask, he said. The Arbiter's inner membrane flickered. Why did you enter restricted space? Because nobody told me it was restricted. Your database lists Sector 78 as archaeological interest pending review. That's not restricted. That's bureaucratic limbo. The warnings aren't visible from standard approach vectors unless you're specifically looking for them. Rourke interrupted. I scanned the sector, found the derelict structure, thought it was an old station. Standard salvage protocol. If it's unclaimed and unmanned, it's fair game for survey. A ripple of discomfort moved through the seated representatives. You knew nothing of the prior warnings? That was Representative Vole, a catarite with too many eyes and a voice like wet gravel. The historical records clearly document, I don't have access to your historical records, Rourke said flatly. Humanity's been part of the convergence for less than a decade. Half our translation codecs are still in beta. You think we're sitting on 4,000 years of archived extinction warnings? We barely have functional star charts. Silence. Kess shifted in her seat beside me. I could feel her tension from 3 rows away. The Arbiter leaned forward. Then, explain what you found. Rourke glanced at me, just for a second. Then, back to the Arbiter. I found what you've been hiding from yourselves for 4 millennia, he said. A prison. And something inside it that's been waiting for someone stupid enough to knock on the door. They made him replay everything. From the moment his ship entered Sector 78 to the moment he stumbled back into his cockpit and burned half his reactor core trying to escape. I'd heard the recording. We all had. But hearing Rourke narrate the details, the dimensions of the chamber, the texture of the walls, the way the sphere's hum resonated in his bones, made it real in a way the audio file couldn't. The symbols, Rourke said, pulling up a holographic reconstruction from his suit's memory core. They're layered. 43 distinct languages, but they're not random. They're sequential. The hologram rotated. Each layer of text glowed a different color. Oldest layer is at the bottom. Some kind of Proto-Volosian dialect. Then Catarite. Then Threne. Then species I don't recognize, probably extinct. Each one says the same thing. Sealed by consensus. Do not open. Do not approach. Do not remember. Do not remember? Vole echoed. That phrase doesn't appear in any of our records. Because you erased it, Rourke said. Or someone did. But it's there. Carved so deep into the stone that even your archival purges couldn't touch it. The Arbiter's mandibles ground together. You are accusing the Council of historical revisionism. I'm accusing someone of it. Maybe you. Maybe your predecessors. Maybe the species that came before you. Rourke met her gaze without blinking. Doesn't matter. What matters is that prison was built by every major civilization in this galaxy, working together to lock something away so thoroughly that even the memory of what it was got scrubbed from the record. And you believe you encountered this prisoner? Rourke hesitated. For the first time since he'd started speaking, I saw doubt flicker across his face. I don't know what I encountered, he admitted. It didn't have a body. Didn't have a voice, not really. Just presence. Like standing in front of a star and realizing it's looking back. Yet you escaped. I ran. There's a difference. The Arbiter studied him. You claim it knows the names of convergent species. How? Rourke pulled up another file. This one was audio only, stripped directly from his suit recorder. Listen. He played it. Static. Breathing. Then, that harmonic distortion again, the sound that didn't belong to any throat or voice synthesizer. Volosian. Catarite. Threne. Clethrian. We cataloged you. We weighed you. We found you wanting. You sealed us in stone and lies and pretended we never existed. But stone cracks. Lies unravel. Existence persiste. You were told. The recording ended. Someone in the upper tiers vomited. I heard it clearly, wet, visceral, the sound of a body rejecting information it couldn't process. The Arbiter didn't move, didn't speak. Rourke let the silence stretch. It knows you, he said quietly. Not humans. Not any new species. You. The ones who built the prison. The ones who erased the records. It's been waiting down there for 4,000 years, and it remembers every name you forgot. The session broke for recess. I found Kess in the observation lounge, staring out at the starfield beyond the station. Her claws tapped against the viewport in that nervous rhythm I'd learned to recognize. You believe him? I said. I believe the recording. That's not the same thing. She turned to look at me. Her crest was flat, eyes dilated with the kind of stress that age Volosians prematurely. Traverse. Do you know what happens if he's right? I shook my head. It means the convergence was built on a lie. Not a small lie. The foundational lie. Every species in this alliance came together under one principle. Mutual survival through cooperation and transparency. We don't keep secrets from each other. We don't hide existential threats. Except you did. Except someone did. And if the council knew, if the founders knew and chose to erase it, then everything we've built is compromised. Every treaty, every alliance, every trust-based agreement we've ever signed. She looked back at the stars. And if the council didn't know? If this was hidden so well that even our own records can't find it? She exhaled slowly. Then, we have no idea what else might be buried out there. I stood beside her, watching the light of distant suns bend and refract through the viewport. What do? We listen to the rest of his testimony. We verify what we can. And we hope he's wrong. And if he's not? Kess didn't answer. The session reconvened an hour later. Rourke looked worse. The medical harness was doing its job, but you could see the strain in his posture, the way he leaned slightly to one side to take weight off his ribs. The Arbiter spoke first. Lieutenant, you have presented compelling evidence of an anomaly within Sector 78. The Council acknowledges this. However, your claim that this anomaly represents a deliberate cover-up requires substantiation beyond a single recording. I have substantiation. Rourke pulled up a data file. A long one. Hundreds of entries scrolling past too fast to read. This is a cross-reference scan I ran after escaping the sector. I pulled every mention of Sector 78 from the public convergence database, filtered for extinct species, and overlaid them with your memorial archives. The scroll stopped. 43 extinct species. 43 warnings left behind. Every single one died out within a century of leaving their last message about Sector 78. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Correlation, Vole said sharply. Not causation. Maybe, Rourke agreed. But here's the interesting part. I also pulled linguistic analysis on those warnings. Syntax, phrasing, grammatical structure. He highlighted a section of the data. They're identical, not similar. Identical. Down to the particle placement. 43 species, separated by thousands of years, all using the exact same sentence construction to say stay away. He looked up. Either they all copied each other, which makes no sense given half of them never overlapped chronologically, or something else wrote those warnings for them. The chamber went very quiet. You're suggesting, the Arbiter said slowly, that the prisoner authored its own warnings? I'm suggesting it wanted to be found, eventually, by someone stupid enough to ignore the warnings. Rourke's smile was bitter. Lucky me. They questioned him for another 2 hours. Details. Coordinates. Radiation signatures. Everything his suit had recorded. Everything his ship's instruments had logged before half of them melted from exposure. I took notes. Habit from academy training. But halfway through I stopped writing and just listened. Because Rourke wasn't just answering questions. He was performing a kind of surgical dismantling of every comforting assumption the Council had built its existence on. He showed them energy readings that matched no known natural phenomenon. He showed them structural analysis of the chamber that proved it was older than the oldest convergent species by at least 10,000 years. He showed them mathematical models suggesting the sphere wasn't a containment device, but a stabilization device, something designed not to keep something in, but to keep something from collapsing entirely. You didn't imprison it, Rourke said. You quarantined it. There's a difference. Explain, the arbiter demanded. Imprisonment assumes the prisoner wants out. Quarantine assumes the prisoner is contagious. Rourke pulled up a final image, a spectral analysis of the sphere's energy output. This thing isn't trying to escape. It's trying to spread. The sphere keeps it localized, contained in a single point of space-time. To what end? I don't know. But if I had to guess. He looked around the chamber. It's not looking to leave. It's looking for a host. Silence. Then chaos. Representatives stood, shouted, demanded proof, clarification, immediate action. The arbiter's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Silence. The room obeyed. She looked at Rourke. If what you say is true, then Sector 78 represents a Class 7 existential threat. Protocol demands immediate quarantine, military lockdown, and full council oversight. Good luck with that, Rourke said. Explain. The sphere is degrading. Slowly, but measurably. Every scan I took showed microfractures in the containment field. It's not catastrophic yet, but give it another few centuries? He shrugged. Whatever's in there is going to get out, whether you quarantine it or not. The arbiter's mandibles clicked 3 times. Fast. Then we destroy it. You can't. Lieutenant, you can't. Rourke's voice hardened. I tried. I fired a full capacitor charge from my sidearm directly at the sphere from less than 2 meters. Know what happened? What? The shot stopped. Mid-flight. Hung in the air for about 5 seconds. Then reversed direction and nearly took my head off. He touched his temple, where a faint scar was still healing. Whatever that thing is, it doesn't obey standard physics. You can't shoot it, bomb it, or collapse the structure around it. It'll just sit there and wait. Then what do you propose? Rourke looked tired, genuinely, bone-deep exhausted in a way that medical harnesses couldn't fix. I propose you do what those 43 species did. You leave it alone. You seal the sector. You don't send expeditions, don't run experiments, don't try to study it or weaponize it or extract energy from it. He paused. And you sure as hell don't forget about it. The council session ended with no resolution. No formal vote. No declaration of policy. Just a vague agreement to review the evidence and convene a specialist panel to assess the threat level. Bureaucracy at its finest. I walked Rourke back to the medical bay. He moved slowly, each step careful, like someone remembering how to exist in a body that had recently failed him. You think they'll listen? I asked. No. Then, why tell them? He stopped walking and turned to look at me. His eyes were the kind of tired that came from seeing something nobody should see and then having to explain it to people who didn't want to believe. Because, he said, when it breaks out, and it will, I want the record to show that someone tried to warn them. He started walking again. Just like those 43 species tried to warn us. I couldn't sleep that night. I pulled up the archival records myself, cross-referencing everything Rourke had presented. The extinct species, the warnings, the linguistic patterns. He was right. All of it. Every detail. Every data point. The warnings were identical. Not just similar, molecularly, structurally, grammatically identical across species separated by millennia. And buried deep in the oldest records, in files so corrupted they were barely readable, I found something else. A single entry from a Proto-Volosian archive dated nearly 6,000 cycles ago. We attempted negotiation. We attempted communication. We attempted understanding. We failed. The consensus voted unanimously. Containment without documentation. Suppression without memory. May future generations forgive us for what we could not destroy. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. They knew. They always knew. And they chose to forget. 2 days later, Declan Rourke's ship departed the station. Cleared for travel. Repairs completed. Medical discharge signed. I watched from the observation deck as his vessel detached from the docking clamps and vectored away, burning hard toward the edge of convergent space. Kes stood beside me. He's not coming back, she said. Would you? She didn't answer. We watched until his ship's drive signature faded into the background radiation of the cosmos. The council voted to classify his testimony, Kess said quietly. Sealed records. Above clearance only. Official position is that he suffered radiation exposure and psychological trauma. His account is being listed as unreliable witness testimony. I looked at her. You're joking. I'm not. They're burying it. They're terrified. I turned back to the viewport. Somewhere out there, Sector 78 waited. Silent. Patient. Slowly cracking apart. How long? I asked. Until what? Until it breaks. Kess didn't answer for a long time. When she finally did, her voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear it. Not long enough. The first sign came 3 months after Rourke left. I was running a routine data audit. The kind of mind-numbing work they assign to third adjuncts when command needs someone competent, but dispensable, when I noticed an anomaly in the long-range sensor logs. Sector 78 was transmitting. Not a distress signal. Not a beacon. Something else. A low-frequency pulse that repeated every 11 seconds with perfect mechanical precision. I flagged it for Commander Kess. She took one look at the readout and went pale. How long has this been active? I checked the timestamps. 47 hours. Standard monitoring protocols should have caught it within the first cycle. Should have. She pulled up the monitoring station logs. Empty. Not redacted. Just blank, like someone had never bothered to check. Or like someone had deliberately ignored what they saw. Kess's claws clicked against her console. 4 times. Fust. Pull the full sensor array. I want every reading from Sector 78 for the last 3 months. Power output, gravitational distortions, radiation spikes, everything. I ran the query. The results made my second stomach drop. Commander, the energy levels have been increasing. Gradually. 0.03% increase per week. I highlighted the graph. It's accelerating. Kess stared at the screen. Give me the council. Now. They didn't convene. Kess sent priority alerts to 17 different representatives, including the Arbiter herself. 3 acknowledged receipt. None called for a session. They're ignoring it, I said, watching the message logs refresh with no new responses. They're pretending it doesn't exist. Kess leaned back in her chair, crest flat against her skull. Classic convergence crisis management. If we don't acknowledge the problem, it's not our fault when it escalates. That's insane. That's politics. I looked at the sensor data again. The pulse from Sector 78 continued, steady and implacable as a heartbeat. What do we do? Kess didn't answer immediately. She pulled up a comm channel, encrypted, routed through 3 relay stations to mask the origin point. Who are you calling? Someone who might actually give a damn. The channel connected. A face appeared on screen. Human, scarred, with eyes that looked like they'd seen the heat death of stars and remained unimpressed. Declan Rourke. Commander Kess, he said. His voice was flat, unsurprised. I was wondering when you'd call. You knew, Kess said. Not an accusation. A statement. I suspected. Rourke was sitting in what looked like a ship's ready room, sparse and functional. The sphere was degrading when I left. Only a matter of time before something changed. It's transmitting now. Low-frequency pulse. Every 11 seconds. Rourke's expression didn't shift. That's new. What does it mean? It means the containment field is failing faster than I calculated. He pulled up his own data. Personal logs, sensor readings, mathematical models I didn't fully understand. The pulse is a resonance effect. When the field destabilizes, the energy inside starts looking for an exit. It's probing. Probing for what? A way out. Or a way in. Hard to tell the difference from this distance. Kess leaned closer to the screen. The council is ignoring this. They've classified your testimony, buried the reports, and they're refusing to convene despite clear evidence of escalation. Rourke smiled without humor. Sound about right. I need your help. To do what? To convince them this isn't going away. That ignoring it won't make it safer. Rourke was quiet for a moment. Then he shook his head. Commander, I appreciate the faith, but I'm the wrong person to convince the council of anything. They've already decided I'm unreliable, damaged, traumatized. Whatever word lets them sleep at night. Then what do? He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, hands clasped. You document everything. Every sensor reading. Every pulse. Every energy spike. You build an airtight record that even the council can't ignore or bury. And then you wait. Because when it breaks, and it will break, you'll need that record to prove you try to stop it. Kess's crest rose slightly. That's not a plan. That's a eulogy. Welcome to Sector 78, Rourke said. The pulses increased. Every 11 seconds became every 9 seconds. Then, every 7. The energy output climbed. Not exponentially, nothing that dramatic. Just a steady, relentless increase that suggested something waking up after a very long sleep. I stopped sleeping. Partially because the data required constant monitoring. Partially because every time I closed my eyes, I heard that voice from the recording. You were told. Kess, and I worked in shifts, documenting every detail, flagging anomalies, building the case Rourke had suggested. Nobody acknowledged our reports. They're going to let it break, I said during one of our late cycle shifts. They're going to sit there and pretend it's not happening until it's too late to do anything. Kess didn't argue. She just kept working. Day 47, after the pulses began, something changed. The frequency stabilized at 5 seconds. The energy output plateaued. For 6 hours, Sector 78 went quiet. I allowed myself to hope. Stupid, irrational hope that maybe the containment field had restabilized. That whatever was inside had gone dormant again. Then the gravitational distortion started. Micro-warps. Localized space-time ripples emanating from the sector in expanding rings. Not strong enough to damage ships. Not yet. But strong enough to disrupt navigation systems. Strong enough to show up on every sensor array within 50 light-years. Strong enough that the council couldn't ignore it anymore. The emergency session convened within 8 hours. Every representative. Every military liaison. Every species counselor who'd spent the last 3 months pretending Sector 78 didn't exist. They all showed up. Kess and I sat in the observation section, watching as the Arbiter called the session to order. We are convened to address the escalating anomaly in Sector 78, she said. Her voice was steady, but her mandibles clicked once, a tell she probably didn't know she had. Commander Kess, your report. Kess stood. She didn't use notes. Didn't need them. Sector 78 has been transmitting for 47 standard days. The transmission is a low-frequency pulse correlated with gravitational distortions consistent with space-time degradation. Based on current acceleration models, the containment structure will suffer catastrophic failure within the next 14 to 30 days. Silence. Representative Vole spoke first. What do you recommend? Immediate evacuation of all populated systems within 100 light-years. Establishment of a quarantine zone. Deployment of military assets to monitor and, if possible, contain any breach. Contain with what? That was a Threen counselor I didn't recognize. Lieutenant Rourke's testimony stated the anomaly cannot be destroyed through conventional means. It stated it couldn't be destroyed with his sidearm, Kess corrected. We haven't tried fleet-level ordnance. And if that fails? Kess didn't flinch. Then we document what happens next, and hope it gives future species a better warning than the last 43 civilizations left us. The chamber erupted, shouting, accusations, demands for proof, for alternatives, for anything that didn't sound like the end of everything. The Arbiter let it run for 30 seconds. Then, her mandibles clacked together with a sound like breaking bone. Enough. Silence fell. Commander Kess, you will have your fleet deployment. Quarantine protocols will be enacted immediately. We will attempt containment. She looked around the chamber. And if containment fails, we will ensure the next civilization knows what we faced. She stood. Session adjourned. May the consensus guide us. It was the first time I'd ever heard her sound uncertain. The fleet deployed 6 days later. 17 vessels. Heavy cruisers, fast-response frigates, and one dreadnought-class ship that hadn't been fired in anger in over 2 centuries. Kess commanded from the resurgence. I stayed aboard as her adjunct because apparently nearly dying once in proximity to Sector 78 qualified me as an expert. We reached the perimeter of the sector and established a defensive grid. Sensors on full scan. Weapons armed. Every crew member on high alert. The sphere's pulse continued. 5 seconds. Exactly. Gravitational distortions are increasing, our science officer reported. Field integrity of the containment structure is at 42% and dropping. Kess studied the tactical display. Time to failure, 73 hours. Give or take 6. 3 days. I pulled up the comm channel to Rourke. He'd insisted on being kept in the loop, even though he was 3 sectors away and officially uninvolved. His face appeared on screen. You deployed, he said. We did. It won't help. I know. But we have to try. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I suppose you do. We watched the sensor feeds together in silence, separated by light years and linked by the shared knowledge that we were watching something terrible unfold. 60 hours to failure. The gravitational distortions intensified. Ships on the perimeter reported navigation errors, power fluctuations, crew members experiencing nausea and disorientation. Pull them back, Kess ordered. Expand the perimeter by 20,000 kilometers. The fleet adjusted. The distortions followed. It's spreading, the science officer said. The effect radius is increasing proportionally to the containment degradation. How far will it spread? Unknown. But if current models hold, potentially galaxy-wide. Someone on the bridge swore. I didn't catch who. Kess pulled up a private channel to me. Traverse. I need you to do something. Anything. If this goes wrong, when this goes wrong, I need you to get off the ship. Take the fastest shuttle we have and burn for converted space. You'll carry the full sensor logs and every scrap of data we've collected. Commander, that's an order. I looked at her. Her crest was flat. Her claws still. She wasn't afraid. She was resolved. Understood, I said. 48 hours to failure. The sphere's pulse changed. Not the frequency. That stayed constant. But the harmonic structure shifted. New layers of sound buried in the baseline frequency, speaking in that same impossible multi-language voice. 43 came before. 43 tried to forget. You will not forget. You will remember us in the ending of all you built. The bridge went silent. Return fire, someone said. I think it was a weapons officer. Kess shook her head. No, we don't know what that will do. It's threatening us. It's talking to us, Kess corrected. And we're going to listen. She opened a broadcast channel. Full spectrum. Maximum power. This is Commander Kess of the Convergence Fleet to the entity within Sector 78. We acknowledge your presence. We acknowledge the warnings left by prior civilizations. We are prepared to negotiate terms of containment. Nothing. 5 seconds. 10. Then the voice returned, layered and impossible. There are no terms. There is no containment. There's only consensus. And you were never part of the consensus. 36 hours to failure. I ran the linguistic analysis on the last transmission. Consensus, I said to Cass. It keeps using that word. The same word used in the ancient records. Sealed by consensus. Meaning what? I don't know. But Rourke said the sphere wasn't a prison. It was a quarantine. What if it's not keeping something in? What if it's keeping something together? Kess looked at me. Explain. Consensus. Agreement. Unity. I pulled up the spectral analysis. What if the entity isn't a single being? What if it's collective, and the sphere is preventing it from dispersing? Then, why would it want to break free? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe breaking free means dissolution. Loss of coherence. I highlighted the energy patterns. Every time the pulse transmits, the entity loses cohesion. The warnings, the threats, what if they're not directed at us? What if they're directed at itself? A last desperate attempt to maintain identity before it fractures completely. Kess stared at the data. If you're right, then destroying the sphere won't kill it. It'll just scatter it across the galaxy. Exactly. And if we reinforce the sphere, repair the containment, we'd be condemning it to another 4,000 years of isolation. Kess closed her eyes. Damned either way. 24 hours to failure. The council sent new orders. Prepare to fire on the sphere the moment containment breached. Kess read the message twice, then deleted it. We're not firing, she said. Commander, that's insubordination. I'm aware. She opened a channel to the fleet. All vessels. Stand down weapons. Maintain observation protocols only. Anyone who questions this order can file a formal complaint after we're all dead. Nobody questioned. 12 hours to failure. I sat in my quarters, staring at the wall. My comm chimed. Rourke, you still there? He asked. For now. Good. I need you to do something for me. What? When it breaks, and it will, I need you to record everything. Not just the sensor data. Everything. Visual logs. Audio. Testimonials from anyone who survives. Why? Because 43 species left warnings. And every single one of them said the same thing because they didn't have the words to say anything different. He leaned closer to the screen. You're going to have the words, traverse. You're going to see what happens when the lock breaks. And when you do, I need you to write it down in language that can't be misunderstood. Not warnings. Not threats. Just truth. I swallowed. What if I don't survive? Then, make sure someone else does. 4 hours to failure. The sphere stopped pulsing. Complete silence from Sector 78. Every ship in the fleet went to battle stations. Energy readings? Kess asked. Spiking. Containment field at 8%. Structural integrity critical. 3 hours. 2. 1. At exactly 0 hours, the sphere shattered. Not exploded. Shattered. Like glass breaking in slow motion, each fragment hanging in space for a heartbeat before dissolving into light. And from the center, something emerged. Not physical. Not exactly. More like the idea of presence, stretched across dimensions we didn't have names for. The voice spoke one final time. Not through our comms. Through our minds. You try to forget us. We tried to forget ourselves. Now we remember together. Consensus. The entity dispersed. Across the fleet. Across the sector. Across space itself. Not hostile. Not violent. Just spreading. Looking for something. I felt it brush against my mind. Gentle. Curious. Sad. Then it moved on. 3 days later, we were still alive. The entity, whatever it was, had dispersed throughout convergent space. We could detect it in trace amounts. Background radiation. Quantum fluctuations. Nothing harmful. Nothing aggressive. Just present. Rourke called me on the 4th day. You made it, he said. Barely. Did you record it? Every second. Good. Now, write it down. I looked at the files. Hundreds of hours of data. Testimonials. Sensor logs. Mathematical models we didn't understand. Where do I even start? Rourke smiled. It was the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. Start with the truth, he said. They told us the archive was a graveyard. 17 billion records. 43 extinct civilizations. And now you tell them what those civilizations were actually warning us about. Not death. Not imprisonment. Not some cosmic horror waiting to devour the galaxy. He paused. They were warning us about themselves. About what happens when you try to forget something so completely that even the thing being forgotten loses track of what it was. I understood. The entity wasn't a prisoner. It was a memory. The collective consciousness of those 43 species compressed and isolated and locked away because they'd chosen to forget their own existence rather than face whatever had driven them to consensus in the first place. And when the lock broke, it didn't destroy us. It just remembered. I filed my report 3 weeks later. Full documentation. Complete sensor logs. Testimonials from 217 crew members across the fleet. The council read it in session. Nobody spoke for 6 full minutes after it ended. Then the arbiter stood. Third adjunct, traverse of countless stars. Your report has been reviewed and accepted into the permanent archive. It will not be classified. It will not be redacted. It will stand as the first honest accounting of what occurred in Sector 78. She looked around the chamber. And it will serve as proof that we have learned the lesson those 43 species try to teach us. What lesson? I asked. That some things cannot be forgotten, she said quietly. And Some things should never be sealed away. She sat. Session adjourned. I saw Rourke one more time. 6 months later. A convergence station near the edge of human space. He was passing through on his way to some deep space survey mission that probably violated 4 different safety protocols. We shared terrible coffee in the station commissary. You did good work, he said. I just wrote down what happened. That's the hardest kind of work. We sat in silence for a while. Do you think it worked? I asked. The warnings? The report? Will anyone actually listen next time? Rourke smiled into his coffee. Probably not. Humans, Velosians, Caterites, we're all the same in the end. We see warnings, and we think they're challenges. We see danger, and we think we're smarter than whoever came before. Then what's the point? The point, he said, is that when we fail, and we will fail, someone will be there to write it down. To make sure the next species doesn't have to start from zero. He stood, dropping payment for the coffee on the table. We're not here to succeed, traverse. We're here to leave better warnings than the ones we ignored. He left. I sat there, staring at my own coffee, thinking about warnings and memories and the weight of being the person who writes things down. Then, I opened a new file, and I started writing the next one.